How's it going, everyone? So for today's video, I decided to, I guess, take a different approach on cleaning these reels and maybe, I guess, go through the process of what I do when I get a new reel, as far as what I think needs to be done to the reel, cleaning, polishing, all that, instead of some of my previous videos where it was mainly just a time lapse of me disassembling the reel, cleaning it up, you know, and the basic before and after. This is my first time doing this, so if I kind of sound like a robot, I apologize for that. So I guess let's just get into it. Alright, so for a starter, we're just going to go ahead and take a look at the reel. A few things I notice is mainly all of this is it's just dirty. Like, I don't know if it's grease, oil, earth, I don't know. Basically, that's all I can see from a cosmetic point of view. Clicker works, which is a good sign. It's gonna be nothing's internally damaged, at least on this side of the reel. You know, turns fine. Worm gear and the pawl all seem to be fine. See the line guide turning there. The only two things I really can see right now is the crank knobs are a little bit stiff, so we could probably fix that. And the only other issue that I can see is we got a little bit, I don't know if you can see it, but we got a little bit of rust right here on the foot of the reel. Maybe a little bit more all along the foot, which, I mean, in the end, isn't a huge problem. I know it's a little tough getting stuff like that off, just because you don't want to take anything too rough to these reels, because these are like chrome plated or nickel plated usually, and if you take anything too rough to them, you're just going to end up scratching or taking the finish off altogether. See, you got a little bit on the bottom too. Most of it looks like dirt, but there is some rust, might be some pitting as well if we take it off. So now that we got our just initial assessment over with, we're gonna start by taking the reel apart. But I do have one more of these reels, so if I could show you here. This one's the same reel, just a different color, and this one is in a lot better condition. So hopefully we can get it to turn out like this one, all nice and shiny. Let's put this back here, and then we can go ahead and get started. So for the most part, most of these reels, you're really only going to need a flathead screwdriver. You want to make sure that it's not too small, not too big, so you don't screw up any of your screw heads. And then I have nut drivers. I know a lot of people don't. You can just use a wrench, but I like using the nut drivers just because they're a little easier. And basically the only thing you're ever going to need that for is to take off the handle. So let's take that off here. Get that off. There we go. One thing I like about this, I guess tray you would call it, is I can separate the parts of the reel. So usually I put the right hand side, because most of these, whoops, there we go. Most of these reels are right hand retrieve, so usually I just go from retrieval side, which is usually the right, and then I go the center, which is usually where I put like the line guide, the pawl, this little screw down here, and then anything that comes from the left side of the reel, which this reel doesn't look like it has much, I usually put on that side. So now we're going to go ahead and start taking off these screws, which this screwdriver does seem to be a little small, but put good enough pressure on there, it should be fine. And then just the end cap, and then oh, there's a spring in there. Alright, so this should just slide off now, and then this red part is basically just like, It's kind of for design, and it's also acts as like a separation. It's like same thing on these reels, where this is just all metal, and it's one solid piece. Same basic design on these, but they put this bakelite piece instead. Just adds a little more color, I think. Alright, now there we go. Now we can go ahead and just slide this off. That's good. Set that to the side. Alright, now we got the spool. Alright, so now you see I have our main gear. Should just be able to slide right off. Okay. Alright, so now you can see, obviously this reel got wet and then pretty much just left. You know, no one really dried it off or anything like that. You can see moisture got trapped all inside there. So we got a decent amount of rust, at least along the edge. This is just old grease. Shouldn't be a problem getting that off. Like I said before, you do just want to be careful. You don't want to take this finish off. I mean, it's the inside of the reel, so I mean it doesn't really matter too much, not like out here. But still, you want to try to keep that finish intact and just protect the metal that's underneath. So we'll go ahead from there. We can set the gears in there. And then we can go ahead, this should just pop off. Might be a little stuck, just because everything's dry. Maybe. There we go. So most reels, they have brass gears for most pieces. This one's for the worm gear. Plastic ones, like when I put it back together, you usually don't have to worry about greasing them. It's not like you have a metal on metal contact. It's all plastic. It's not like it's really gonna wear down that much. I grease it anyway just because. So now, for the most part, this reel is all one solid piece. Everything is riveted together. It's not all of it screws. So as far as disassembly, is really not much I'm going to be able to do. Let's grab this and take this knob off. Oh, too big. Let's see if that one's good. Maybe. Come on. There we go. Stuck to it. Okay, so now if I could just move this over, probably should have done this before I take the gear off. We can take this screw off and hopefully we can at least slide the pawl out, or the worm gear. And there, a little stuck, no problem. Now this screw is a very, very important screw, because without this, the pawl in there is just going to slide out and you're not going to be able to use the reel. Okay. Now, one technique that I use to get the pawl out, because you can see it's just flush right there, there's nothing you can really grab onto. I just like to turn the worm gear a little bit, and sometimes it'll just slide right out, or at least like dislodge itself a little bit. Sometimes it just gets stuck in there. See, there we go. There we go. And then what we can do is try to put this right through there. There we go. Alright, so that's basically, you could see everything is riveted together. The foot is riveted to the side plates. Same thing with these. They're all just riveted right to the side plates. So on this reel, unfortunately, we can't really take any of this off. Usually I'd like to, just it's easier to clean, get your fingers in there and everything, but looks like for this one, we're kind of stuck doing it the hard way. So for now, what we're going to do is see, sometimes, there we go, sometimes you get this gear that slides right onto the spool shaft. Sometimes these are also just I don't know, they're punched on, riveted, whatever you want to call it. But this one we can just slide right off, so we'll set that in there. Set that aside. And then move on to our cleaning. Alright, so what we do first, or at least what I do first, for cleaning these reels is I like to soak some of the internal parts in mineral spirits. The mineral spirits won't get them perfectly clean, but it helps to loosen up some of this old grease. Like to see what we got on the inside of this plate, and you know, some of the debris and everything. And I just use, you know, this clean strip mineral spirits. Don't need anything special. I suppose any sort of thinner would work, like lacquer thinner or paint thinner probably work the same, don't quote me, but I just use mineral spirits for what I do. And reels like this, we got some plastic pieces in here. Don't put the plastic pieces in the mineral spirits. I've had issues before where I put paint thinner in a plastic cup before. Left it alone for a few hours, came back, and the cup was just absolutely destroyed. Just ate away at the plastic. I'd assume mineral spirits would work the same way. That's why, you know, I'd rather be safe and just not use it, and that's why I'm using this glass bowl right here. So with the plastic parts, usually what I'll do is I'll just take like a cotton swab and, you know, just kind of brush them off. You know, dip this in the mineral spirits and then just wash it off, but I wouldn't soak it at all. So what we're going to do is we're going to just place some of the internal, you know, the gears, you know, the spring you can put in here. Even the screws, I'll just put in there. I know those usually don't really have grease on them, but I think it just helps loosen up some of the debris and whatnot that's present. Usually whenever I soak things, I try to separate them. I know it takes a little bit more time, but I don't like getting the screws, like switching up the screws from each side. So like if I'm soaking parts from the handle side, I'll put those screws in with some of this stuff, and then once I take all that out, I'll wait and then do stuff from the other side, just so I don't screw up the screws. Most of the time they're the same size and the same length, but I just like to keep things uniform and basically just the way that I found them. I don't know, as far as like these handles go, I know most of the time, like for instance these knobs and this piece are Bakelite, which is kind of like a plastic. I've never put these in, just soaked them right in the mineral spirits. I'm not sure if it would do anything to them, but I'd rather be safe, you know, safe than sorry. So usually I just keep these out. I'll, you know, take the cotton swab, clean them up as best I can, and then just move on from there, not soaking them. So then for this piece, just slide this off. Might be a little stuck. There we go. Put that down in there, drop that in. You don't gotta let these soak too long. You know, probably 5-10 minutes, that's good enough. Anything beyond that, it's really not gonna help you. Like soaking them for an hour versus 15 minutes, the results are gonna be almost the same. So, while I let those soak, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take some liquid wrench. This is what I like to do for the knobs that are seized up. Usually this works for me. Sometimes it doesn't, and that's just how it is. But I just drop it down right in here. Alright. Let's put this cap back on. Alright, so then basically what we do is we kind of just work them around while we let the liquid wrench kind of penetrate down in there. Just work it. I can feel them freeing up a little bit. Obviously it's not going to be perfect, but hopefully it'll be better than how we found it. I don't know, you can see a little bit that, let me see if you can see it here. that the one, I'm holding this perfectly straight, this one is bent. That's just because the rivet down here, or whatever, the punch, is a little bit loose. Usually I just try not to worry about stuff like that because you're just going to end up cracking these knobs or breaking them off, and at that point I feel like I would rather just leave them a little bent. If I can find a better way to do it, by all means I would try to. If I could figure out a way just to, get these off a little bit. I don't know if you can. I haven't tried, but I'd rather just leave it the way it is than trying to fiddle with it and then just breaking it. So we're going to let that soak from a little bit, and then what we're going to do is going to start cleaning up some of this grease. So just dip our cotton swab and then just start wiping it. And you can see most of the time, unless the grease is just rock hard, it'll come off pretty easily. Don't gotta saturate it a whole lot with the mineral spirits, but just enough where you can get it a little bit wet. And then once it's dirty, just toss it, grab a new one, and just try to clean as best as you can. Mineral spirits really isn't going to do much as far as rust goes. Might take off a little bit that's loose, but for the most part you're going to have to use something different. See, like right there, took off a little bit of that surface rust. It almost just looks like it's like stained rather than actually rusted right there. But I mean, as long as you get this, at least the grease is really what you're mainly concerned about with the mineral spirits. Grab a towel and wipe it. So you can see all that grease that was originally there around where the main gear sits and the spool sits in is now gone. We're going to worry about the rust a little bit later. For right now, we're just going to keep on working with our mineral spirits and try to get everything off of there. Move this out of the way. Alright, so again, this is that Bakelite. This is why I'm not going to soak it, just because I'm not sure what's going to happen. But you can see here that take it off pretty easily. Just scrape this inner edge, and the grease pretty much just falls off. A little bit of pressure. See right around here. Try to get this spot right here. And boom, it pretty much just comes right off. Alright, so that's the spot that I hit. You can see the grease is pretty much gone, and then still got to do the rest of it. Alright, so one quick thought. While I'm cleaning the spool, right here, we have this little gear that's for the clicker. Now, I don't know if it'll show up here or not. Yeah, it probably won't show up. But you might be able to see some of the little strands of cotton that get caught on some of these gears. You want to be careful with that when you're cleaning stuff off with a Q-tip, that you don't get your cotton all intertwined with those, those sharp edges and everything, because then it's going to be really hard to get those out, especially on something like this, but also like the main gear, where it's, the edges are going to be sharper and there's going to be a lot more teeth. So I would use like a toothbrush. I just use, this nothing special, just this really cheap toothbrush to clean off those versus one of these Q-tips. Just a quick thought, and we'll check back in once we're all done degreasing. Alright, so I threw in my last couple parts from the left side of the reel in the mineral spirits. Finished degreasing most of the parts here. Took out the internals out of the mineral spirits. Just cleaned them off with the brush. Don't gotta be perfect with them. You know, there's really no need to spend an hour cleaning off 3 parts. I mean, if you want to do that, go for it, go ahead. But for me, I just get it off the best that I can, and if there's a couple little spots that are, really, really stuck on there, there's really no point in worrying about it, especially if it's on the inside of the reel. It's not really going to affect the performance of the reel or, really anything. So now what we're going to do is we're going to try to clean all this off. A lot of this cloudiness is just from, like, the dried mineral spirits. I don't worry about wiping it off all that much. But what we're going to do now is we're going to use some Brasso. This stuff, surprisingly enough, I never used to use it. I used to just, shine these reels off the best that I could and then just move on. But once I started using this, the difference is, it's just amazing. You wouldn't think something like this would work as well as, I guess, like, you just wouldn't think, like, I'll show you how well this stuff will actually work. It takes off more than you'd think it'd take off 100%. So you just put a little bit on your toothbrush, not too much. And they say to use gloves for this stuff. Same thing with the mineral spirits. I don't, just because I don't want to have to take off my gloves, put them back on, take them off, put it back on. This stuff definitely has a unique smell to it. It's just, can't describe it. Doesn't smell good. Definitely doesn't smell good. But it's whatever. It just kind of gets on your hands. The mineral spirits, they say use gloves too. I've really never had an issue with it. The only thing that happens is it really just dries out your hands. Other than that, I would just be careful. It is extremely flammable, and it does give off a little bit of fumes. Nothing too bad, but just something to be mindful of. Alright, so what we're going to do now is pretty much just go for it. I don't expect this stuff to take off any of the rust, but with a little bit of work, it should take off almost all, if not all, of this surface, like this cloudiness and this dirt and oil. So we'll just give it one go, and we'll see how it turns out. Now, if you want really, really good results with this stuff, I would recommend after your initial go, wipe it all off and then get some new stuff on your brush, just so you're not, pushing around all the Brasso filled with all your dirt and junk and all that. So if you want it to come out really nice and shiny, you're definitely going to have to do a second coat. Just work it right in, and then this will highlight, once I wipe this off, this will definitely highlight more areas I need to focus on. Alright, so just, once that's done, just give it a wipe. We'll see how this turns out. Clean part of the rag here. If you don't wipe it off properly, same thing with the mineral spirits, it's gonna dry on it weird, so you're gonna make sure you're gonna wipe off all the excess with like a softer cloth. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything special, but something maybe not super rough. And then so now, even just looking after our first one, you can see there's definitely a noticeable difference. I mean, it's definitely a lot more shiny. You see it took off a lot of what was on there. I mean, in the toothbrush, I think just a dollar store toothbrush. For the Brasso, I would use bristles that are a little bit stiffer, just so you can work it in a little more. The one that I use for the mineral spirits, it's a little bit softer. Again, I didn't do that on purpose. That's just what I had, and that's what works for me. But what we're going to try to do now is get rid of, you can see there's a little bit of cloudiness here, and then up top here. Around here you can see it's definitely a little more shiny and the finish is clearer. So we're going to try to get rid of that, and we're going to do another coat. There we go. Don't have to use too much, just enough to make sure you can cover it and really work it in. And then be careful too, because if you touch one of the spots that you've hit with your fingers, the oil from your fingers will leave a mark too. So I mean, obviously it's not going to be perfect. Usually you can just wipe those fingerprints away, but definitely something to watch out for. Alright, you know, let me see if I can find a clean part here. Okay. I'm trying to wipe it away again. Let's move some of this. Move to a cleaner part. Alright, so that's pretty much all there is to do as far as cleaning up like a part that doesn't really have any rust. You can see still it's a little bit cloudy. With just a toothbrush and, you know, a cloth, there's not much you can do about that. If you want to get something finer, probably, you know, get it to really shine. I'm not going to worry about that too much. I mean, for my purposes, I know that it's clean, and, you know, I did what I need to do to make sure that this reel, well, stay clean. So, from now, I'm just going to leave that how it is. You can see we got marks here, right there, and then alongside here. I don't know, it appears, I don't know, maybe the finish is coming off a little bit or bubbling or something. Not much you can do about that unless you want to destroy this finish on here. But what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to try to tackle this side. What we're going to do is go ahead with the Brasso again first. And then we're going to see what happens. I don't expect the Brasso to do too much for the rust. I mean, maybe besides take away some of the color and just leave behind like the bare rust spots. I'm gonna have to do something different for that. We'll come across later once we're done with the Brasso. But this should be good, at least for a preliminary. You can see the brush is even a little bit orange from the rust. Just taking off some of the loose stuff. So quick, just brush it off. Get a clean part. Might have to get a new rag. Okay. So let me throw this here, grab a new one. Alright, so for this, you can see it does look better. You know, it does end up taking off some of the rust that's on there. Not a whole lot. There's not much you can do with just, you know, toothbrush and Brasso. You do want to watch out, though, when there's holes in the side plates, that when you're brushing it off, Brasso's going to come through and end up on the other side that you just finished. So you're going to want to wipe that off. For now, we're just going to do one more coat. Watch out, too. You're going to get Brasso all up in these bigger holes, too. So I just run right through there. It comes right off. For smaller holes, you know, nothing special. I just use a toothpick. Just run it through, and it's good enough. Brasso's not going to hurt anything. So I'm going to go ahead with one more coat. Now we got a clean rag too, so hopefully that should make this shine a little bit more. There we go. So I'm going to wipe this off. Alright, so that does not look half bad at all. I'm not going to worry about this side too much as I would the other side, just because it's going to be the inside of the reel. We're going to cover it all up with grease anyway. But we're going to try to finish up the frame of the reel, the spool, and the line guide are the only parts we're really going to worry about putting the Brasso on for now. Then after that, we can see what we can do about this rust. So now that we're done with the Brasso, you can see now that everything looks a lot better, actually, as far as, you know, being shined up. Obviously, there's still going to be some marks here and there. Some of it is due just to, they need another quick wipe with a clean cloth, especially right here. See, now it's basically gone. Which I'm not going to worry about because, again, this is an internal part. Not worried about it too much looking all perfect. But as far as the rust goes, one technique that I've tried before, haven't tried in a while, and not so much on reels either, but is using vinegar to try to dissolve some of the rust. If you saw in my first video, actually, where I did this reel up here, this Hendrix reel, I used the wire brush, or the wire brush on the Dremel, and I kept on spraying it with vinegar to try to dissolve some of the rust. And I'm not sure how much the vinegar, actually helped versus just using the wire brush. I didn't try it without wetting it down with the vinegar, but I'm not going to take the Dremel to this just because of this finish. That other reel is pretty much all brass and it can withstand the wire brush. But for this reel, we're going to try to use something softer. So I got a piece of just aluminum foil here. So what we're going to do is we're going to spray, or we're going to test it out first on the bottom of the foot, just because that's kind of like an insignificant part of the reel. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and spray just a little bit. Then we're going to take a piece of our aluminum foil. Don't need a huge piece. And then what we're just going to crumple it up a little bit to a ball and just slowly Go like this, and I'm just gonna see what happens. We're gonna obviously try not to take off any of the finish, but we're gonna try to get rid of some of this rust, and we're gonna see how it turns out. I'm not expecting, you know, dramatic results with this or anything like that, but it's definitely worth the shot. Try to get rid of some of this rust. On this part, like I said, I'm testing it on the bottom of the reel. And because I just don't, you know, I'm not really too concerned about the bottom. Obviously, if I start, you know, destroying it, I'm gonna stop. But nothing really should happen. Aluminum's the softer metal. Oops. Let's see here. Wipe this off. See, now with this, this is basically just the finish bubbling. It's not really taking off the finish. There's not really like any major surface rust right here, so it's not going to work too well. But what we're going to do is we're going to try it on one of these posts, or even the top right here. So you can see that, see some rust right here, a lot more than right here. So what we're going to go ahead is we're going to try it up there and see what happens. Spray a little more vinegar. Start rubbing it down more with the aluminum foil. And actually, it might be hard to show up on camera here, but let me give this a quick wipe. And you can actually see there were some spots of rust on here that are now gone. This little spot here, let me see right there. You can see that's just bubbling. It's, you know, that's going to be rust up underneath the metal that this is plated in, you know, most likely chrome. So that we're probably not going to be able to take care of unless I took the chrome off, which I obviously don't want to do. But we're going to try to tackle some of the rest of this rust, mainly spots right here, this corner here, and then we're going to see if we can make a difference on this plate right here. Try to get rid of some of that rust, and then we'll see how it turns out. Alright, so anyway, as I was saying, yeah, just make sure you clean both those sides, so one side isn't dirty, one side's clean, and then you don't have to go back and re-clean it. So anyway, we're going to start putting the reel back together, greasing it all up. Usually I start with the non-handle side. It has the least amount of moving parts in it, and it's a good starting point. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this end cap on. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this spring down in here, but first what we're gonna do, take our paintbrush, put a little dab of grease right, maybe see if I can just not spread it around there. Just put a little bit down in the end of the end cap here, and then just kind of just press it on there and tighten. There we go. Now with everything on here, you don't have to wrench it on there or anything. Just tighten it down good enough so it's not going to come off. So now I'm going to grab this. Grab a toothpick here. Now this hole's really small, otherwise I would use my paintbrush. Don't need that much. Just dab a little bit down here. Set that down. There we go. Put it right onto, maybe. There we go. Whoops. I lied. Don't put that on yet. So, let me just think how we can do this first. Probably what we're going to have to do, slide the worm gear in first. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a little bit of grease on the worm gear. It's not too much, you know, just enough. Usually, for how I tend to grease things up, if it's A, moving, and B, it has metal on metal contact, just grease it. Again, don't need too much. And with something like this, that's not necessarily on the internals of the reel, I can always just add more later. There we go. So what we're going to do now is... Now this is an important part. I've done this, I couldn't even say how many times I've done this, but when you put the worm gear on your reel, make sure you have the line guide handy, because you're going to have to run it through the line guide first, because once it's in the reel, you're not going to be able to put the line guide in, and you're going to have to take it all back apart just for that. So once we get that through, there we go. Now just so everything doesn't fall out, I can put this screw in there now. There we go. Alright, so now we're going to put our pawl in. Again, don't lose this piece. This is a very important piece. It's easy to lose track of or have it slip out of your fingers just because it's so small. Now, what you want to do is just move it around. Maybe try to give it a little twist just so it finds those grooves in the worm gear. Now, once you think it's in there, just give the worm gear a twist to see if it moves. And see, mine isn't really moving. Oh, there we go. I'll put my finger on it and just see. There. So now I know that it's in there, because you can see the line guide moving along with my finger. So right now I'm going to twist it out of the way of the foot so I can put its retainer screw in. Set that right there. Grab a screwdriver. And there we go. So now that's in there fine. Now basically, we're basically done with this whole side of the reel. The only thing left to do is drop a little bit of grease on here, but a little bit more right in the end there. At least try to. There we go. And then just drop it in, making sure that the pin goes right in the hole. There we go. Okay, so now we're gonna drop this in, grease up this post, drop this in. Usually it doesn't matter which way these go. Sometimes you'll see like a U-shaped hole on the gears like this, and you're gonna want to drop that face down onto the spool pin just so it locks into place and stays there. Next, we're going to grab our sprocket for the worm gear. Going to grease this surface right here. Going to grease this up just a little bit, and again, like I said, this is plastic. We really don't have to worry about greasing it up too much. There isn't going to be any metal on metal here. Just, you know, a light layer. Drop that on right there. Make sure it fits on. Press it on. There we go. Alright, so now I'm going to set this aside and I'm going to start assembling this part. So what you're going to want to do is make sure on reels that have this type of configuration, you're going to want to make sure you assemble. Oops, there we go. You're going to make sure you want to assemble this correctly. So you want to look at the orientation of the reel. You know that it's going to drop in to here. So we know that when we took the reel apart, this plastic gear was on top, this metal one was on the bottom. So what you're going to want to do is first grease this up, just so everything slides on nice and good. Then what you're going to want to do is slide on the plastic one first. Maybe. There we go. Little tight fit. And then you're going to want to slide on this washer. And a lot of times this washer, you can tell on which side of the gear goes. You can see, not sure if it'll show up here, but you can see the outline of this plastic one right there. Just from, because it's been sitting for years and years. So you set this washer on. Gonna set a little bit of grease on there. There we go. Set that on there. And then our brass one. So we're gonna do this just flat surface where the washer sits on. Again, not too much, just, you know, fair amount. And then make sure it goes on. Bam. Alright, so for now, we can grease all these teeth up. This surface. Alright. So now, and then as you see why, as I'm doing this, why I do it this way. I'm going to drop this in, like that. Then we're going to put our handle on. You don't got to worry about greasing up anything on the handle. Going to get our nut here. If I can get it on straight. I don't got to worry about tightening it too much at the moment. Do that in a minute. But now what we can do is, now all this is on, it's not going to fall off or anything. Now we can basically, once we get this in there first, see how this goes. Alright, so you see this little piece that's cut out right here, that like semicircle, that's going to be where the worm gear sprocket is. Set a little bit of grease in there and set it down in, making sure that it's flush with right there. Now we can set this in there. Making sure that everything fits nicely. Might have to give it a little bit of turn just so the gear, all the gear teeth fit good. Now it's not going to turn until you tighten everything down. Now again, don't have to wrench it or anything like that. Just make sure it's tight enough. Drop that in there. And then there's that. There's that. I'm gonna put this spring on here. I'm gonna drop a little bit of grease. Might want to take the spring out Drop a little bit of grease on there. Again, metal to metal contact. Then press it down. And then there. So now, pretty much the final step. We're going to tighten down our nut here. Good. And then see if it works. Now right now it's a little bit dodgy. Once you put it, let me take this clicker off. So sometimes if your spool seems to be a little bit like it's not smoothly reeling, just back off a little bit on your end knobs, or on these knobs on the end. Just back them off a little bit and it should reel fine. Now, put the clicker on. It's not going to be super smooth with the clicker on. Some clickers are a lot more powerful than other reels. But for the most part, that's all there is to it. Cleaning a reel like this. Few things to note that make this reel different than a lot of the reels that I clean. Like I said, this one is a one-piece frame, which means that you can't unscrew and take these out. A lot of them don't have springs in the end caps. Like what you saw when I unscrewed both of these, there was 2 springs in them. A lot of them don't have that. There's just the end caps that you just twist right on, and that's all there is to them. Other than that, this reel is really no different than any other reel. You can see on this one right here, really the only difference is this extra knob right here, and that's spool tension. And that's really it. But yeah, that's how I go about cleaning all these reels that you see up here. Pretty simple. Don't be afraid to try it. And that's all it. Alright, well I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll be seeing you guys next time.